This is the Your Career Story podcast, and you're listening to episode 82. You need to get okay with this to step into your purpose. Welcome to Your Career Story podcast, a show that's designed for rockstar professionals looking for that extra booster shot of confidence in their careers. Whether you're trying to get clarity on a job transition, want some work-life balance inspiration, or need a strategy to snag that promotion or raise, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Jena ex-Wall Streeter turned startup junkie who now coaches hundreds of clients, empowering them to take back control of the job search and land their dream job. So sit back, grab a glass of wine, and prepare yourself for your weekly boost of career confidence. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Your Career Story podcast. I am so very excited to be with you here today. Before we dive on into the subject matter, I just wanted to say a special shout out and a thank you to the people who have recently been reviewing and rating the Your Career Story podcast. So I have a couple of reviews I want to share with you, and thank you so much for posting these. C. Doyle said, "I love this podcast. Jena does a fantastic job breaking down the job hunt, advice, and dives deep into how important mindset is in the whole process. Highly recommend." Thank you, C. Doyle, for posting that. We really appreciate it. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while and you've really enjoyed what you've been listening to, give us a rating. Give us a note like this that C. Doyle said, just because it helps our rankings go higher. It helps more people discover the podcast. Plus, it keeps us motivated in a totally selfish, shameless way. It keeps us motivated to keep this podcast going. So we love seeing your words. Lauren also said, "I absolutely love this career podcast. Such great tips, and Jena provides actual actions to take to get to the next job or gain some confidence. I highly recommend it." So C. Doyle, Lauren, thank you so much for posting that on iTunes. We would love to see your review if you've been listening to this podcast for a while. All right, let's hop into this episode. So what are we going to be talking about today? Today, we're going to be talking about three things. Number one, I want to be talking about what does it actually mean to quote unquote step into your purpose. There's a lot of buzzwords going around the world right now. There's a lot of buzzwords on Instagram, and influencers are using the word step into your purpose. And I've always avoided that language, quite frankly, on my podcast or in any of my marketing materials, because I felt like it was so fluffy and didn't really have any roots. But I know that a lot of people resonate with this language. So I want to break it down for us today to understand, what does that actually mean? How does that play out? I never understood it, but I think today in preparing for this episode, I have a better understanding, and I hope you will too, of what it actually means to step into your purpose, and it doesn't feel as vague. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about. Then we're going to talk about what's the number one thing holding you back from that purpose. This is something I have noticed in my own life, and this is something that I see in the majority of women that I work with. It's actually very rare that I don't see a woman who struggles with this, or a man, quite frankly. We're going to talk about what is that number one thing holding you back. And as always, number three, we're going to talk about some action steps on how to overcome it. So first, again, what does it mean to step into your purpose? Number two, what's the number one thing holding you back from that purpose? And number three, how do you overcome that? Awesome. This is going to be a really, really fun episode, and I had a lot of fun preparing for it as well. So who is this episode for? This episode is for the woman who wants to know what her purpose is. How many of you that are listening right now are thinking, yeah, I've been asking myself that question for the last 20 years, or I've been asking myself that question in the wake of COVID. 2020 has totally upended how I think about myself, my career, my purpose, all of that. I'm questioning it all right now. If that's you, I want to give you a hug across the microphone right now. I so get that. This episode is also for the woman who is all kinds of emotional when life is not working. That is me. My husband says that my emotions are a boomerang. So I feel really deeply, and then I try to get over it really deeply. So if you have a lot of emotions around this area of your life, this episode's for you. This episode's also for the woman who wants to be bold and who wants to be fearless in her life and in her career. Because as we know, and if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, those two things are intertwined, life and career. And if we fail to recognize that, we are going to be unhappy for a very long time. So if you are looking to be that woman who is fearless, who is bold, who is excited to take control of her life and her future, this episode is really going to be for you. So when I was doing some research in preparation for this, I really wanted to look up the definition of purpose. Because again, like I mentioned, it just is a word that is, floats around the internet and people are claiming, this is your purpose. And what does purpose mean? Does it mean your job function? Is it a vocation? Is it like a life calling? Is it a hobby? Is it a business? Like the word purpose, I feel like is so oversaturated in the marketplace right now. And so because of that, it's kind of gotten watered down. Don't you agree? So I wanted to get back to a couple of different definitions and quotes that are going to help us define what is purpose. What does it mean to have purpose in our life and in our careers? So I love this quote by Frederick Buechner, and I think I said his name right, so forgive me if I didn't. He said, "The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." So again, the place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. That's a definition for purpose. I've heard this one actually a lot, in different church circles. I've heard this before, but I think this is relevant whether or not you belong to a church or have any religious affiliation, right? Purpose is where you have deep gladness about something and you notice that there's something missing in the world that is not being fulfilled and you feel like it's your calling to help fill that place. Some synonyms in the Thesaurus, say that 5 times fast. Thesaurus are motivation, impetus, occasion, motive. These are all words to also describe the word purpose, right? To have motivation, that it's an actual occasion, it's a motive, that you have a motive, you're on purpose, right? You're acting on purpose. So I think those words are helpful for us. And then the great Brene Brown, who I love, she said vulnerability, and she talks about purpose from the lens of vulnerability, because obviously if you've heard any of her TED Talks, if you haven't heard of her by now, just turn me off and go to her podcast. But what she said, because she's fantastic in the work that she talks about, but she says vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity. If we want greater clarity in our purpose or deeper and more meaningful spiritual lives, vulnerability is the path. So Brene is telling us that purpose actually comes from being vulnerable. Right? So vulnerability is actually one of those places to understand what our purpose is. And I actually do believe that. I would say that for myself, when I got really vulnerable with myself, and just with friends too, to understand what was I made for, how was I designed, what are the things that I am really excited about and where I feel like there is a void in the world. Like all of these definitions are coming together. And Margaret Atwood actually says, what am I living for and what am I dying for are the same question. So these are some different ways for us to think about purpose, right? Maybe it's vulnerability. Maybe that's how we see what our purpose is. Maybe it's understanding for asking the question, what am I living for? I ask this question to a lot of my clients, why do you work? So it's a similar idea. What is the purpose? Why? What are you living for? And what are you dying for? It's the same question. That's what Margaret Atwood says. And so hopefully a couple of these definitions are making you start to realize, okay, I can understand where purpose is coming into play. I can visualize it for myself and I can resonate with some of these quotes to help me understand what is the definition of purpose. I can't understand what my purpose is unless I understand the definition of it. And here's what I want to encourage you with. A purpose isn't just your career. Right? It may include your career, but I think where we get a little lost, and it's the same thing when we're talking about calling, and you can listen actually to a couple episodes back where I was talking with my friend Steph J about what it means to actually find your calling, which maybe my Christian friends probably hear that word perhaps a little bit more often. It's just a very common Christianese that we hear in the church. But she talks about that a couple episodes back about how do you figure out your calling? I think for us on a grander scale, how do we figure out our purpose? A lot of people assign purpose and career or vocation together. And I don't always believe that to be true. Could it be a part of your career as part of your purpose? Absolutely. But I think that is a very narrow view and we don't have to it puts a lot of pressure, I think, on our careers. Right? It puts a lot of pressure on our careers to be the end all be all, because if we feel like we're not feeling fulfilled in our career, we feel like we don't have purpose. When we don't have purpose, we get into a really crazy state. And I don't know about you, my mental health goes south when I feel like I don't have purpose, right? I could have a day where I feel like I wasn't living on purpose and I could feel down about it. So I want us to free ourselves of the expectation that purpose equals career. It may include career, but it doesn't have to equal career. And I think it's different for every single person, right? Purpose looks different for every single person. My husband would tell you his purpose is not wrapped up in his work. Now, does he show up, do good work? Does he have, for him personally, he sees a part of it that is redemptive, and there is a ministry portion to it in terms of like how he shows up and serves his clients. But he does not define his career as his purpose. Where someone like myself, who literally talks about careers all day long and helps women gain their confidence back in their careers, who tells my own story of my own, frustration in my career. This is more wrapped up in my purpose because I feel like who I am is very much directly aligned with my career, which we have talked about before. But my husband has told me, he's like, you know what my life goal is to be a husband. And so I already checked that off, got you. Now we'd want to have kids, obviously, eventually far in the future. But, my husband's purpose isn't wrapped up in his work, but he is living on purpose. He sees purpose which is very healthy, honestly, for me. He's a good yin, we're good yin and yang, but he sees purpose really in his relationships, in his friendships. He is very, very relational, very loyal. He's had the same best friends for 20 plus years. He is all in on those relationships. And that for him is living a purposeful life. So it doesn't even have to do with necessarily his career directly. It's more his career is part of it. Where some of us, like myself, and maybe you who are listening, you want to find purpose in your career. And so I think that it can be a both and conversation. And this is something I'm even uncovering for myself of what does it look like to have purpose in my life and my career, not just my career. And so where we also go wrong, I believe, a little bit in this process is we think that we only have one life purpose. And I actually want to challenge us on that idea. I've been really thinking about the idea of seasons. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I probably posted a verse in Ecclesiastes 3, that talks about different seasons. And I really believe that your purpose can change over time depending on what season of life that you're in. So early on in my life, my purpose looked one way. 5 years ago when I was single and living in Nashville, or no, I wasn't living in Nashville in 5 years ago, but I was living in New York, right? My purpose looked different then. And my purpose looks maybe a little bit different now that I'm thinking about children and building a family, things that I maybe wouldn't have thought so intensely about when I wasn't married. So I really think that we are allowed to have different purposes for different seasons. So I think it takes the pressure off of us to figure out what's our one life thing. Now, if you get that and you figure out what your one life thing is, I applaud you. But for a lot of you, I feel like you're very lost. And I understand this so much because you're trying to force yourself into one specific box when really perhaps you have a couple of boxes throughout your life that you're fitting yourself into. And so I want you to give yourself a little bit of grace to understand that it doesn't have to equal your career. Your purpose could be relational and not career focused, or it could include your career. It's either or. It doesn't have to, or rather it's both and not either or. It can really live in both environments. Are you absolutely frustrated with your job search? You apply online and hear nothing back. Or worse, you get a "thank you very much for applying, but we decided to go another way." What? Did anyone even look at your resume? You have no idea what you did wrong and you want to know exactly how to hack the system. Well, friend, I've got you covered. Wouldn't it be great to have hiring managers run after you? Wouldn't it be great if your job search was a heck of a lot easier? And wouldn't it be absolutely spectacular if you could get inside a hiring manager's head and figure out exactly what they wanted from you? Well, that's why I created my free training, How to Land Your Dream Job Without Losing Your Resume to the Online Abyss. If you're looking to understand what the heck recruiters want and how to be seen as the only person for the job, you need to check out this training. Head on over to www.jenaviviano.com/masterclass to sign up. This training is compiled from years of experience working with mid to senior level corporate women. In this free masterclass, I'll walk you through where you're getting stuck and why you aren't getting traction, the behind the scenes reasons an employer isn't picking up your resume, how to sell yourself in a non-sleazy way so that hiring managers come running after you. Plus, for those of you that want to hop on live, I have an extra special bonus for you. How to Land Your Dream Job will show you what you are doing wrong and exactly what you need to change so that hiring managers and recruiters fight over you, instead of you blindly applying online and hoping something sticks to the wall. Again, Head on over to www.jenaviviano.com/masterclass to sign up for this free training. I can't wait to see you in there. So here's what I think. Let's say just for today, though, that we are talking about work, because this is a work podcast, right? That we are relating purpose back to work. So here's what I think that, and this is something that you can write down and you can take some notes around and journal through for yourself. But purpose is really encompassing a couple of different things. If we're speaking about work particularly, right? If we are trying to say, okay, let's talk about the career aspect of purpose. What does that look like? It comes down to your passion, your skills, your values, like Frederick Buechner said, what the world needs, and then what can you be paid for? So it's passion, skills, values. That's usually where our purpose comes in, right? And then if we're talking about work specifically, it's what does the world need and what can you be paid for? Whenever you're looking at a combination of those things, and I can even reflect back on my career. Early in my career, I had a passion for entrepreneurship. I had a passion for helping people figure out what they wanted to do with their lives. I was good at coaching, so that was my skills, and my values was really around just serving people. So those are the things that I was good at. And then I saw, okay, what does the world need? Actually, people need help changing their jobs and selling themselves effectively and realizing that they have what it takes and to change their mindset around how they look at themselves in their career. And then I realized I could be paid for that. So that's where, when we're talking about work, I found purpose in my work because I was able to parse out those 5 things: passion, skills, values, what the world needs, and what I could have been paid for. So I want you to ask that same question for yourself. What are your passions? Spend some time journaling through that. What are the skills that you have? What do you really value? And you can, you might be a person that writes like a long list of 20 things. You also may be the person that writes down 3 things. Either one of those is okay. You don't have to have quantity does not matter. Quality matters in this instance, right? And then I want you to think deeply about what does the world need and what can you be paid for? If you want to associate your purpose with your work, or if you want to find some purpose in your work, you have to get really clear about what your passion, skills, and values are, and then understand what the world needs and what you can be paid for. So this is what it might look like for some of you. Purpose outside of your career, or just in general, inside your career, outside your career, in general, this is what purpose could look like for you. It could look like staying home with your children. I look back on my life and I think about my mom, who was a stay-at-home mom, and I definitely didn't appreciate her as a kid. And as I'm coming up into the mothering years of like when we're hoping to have children, that was a really big sacrifice that she made. And she was living her life on purpose of what she wanted for her children. And I respect my mother for that. And if that is a decision that you can make, or that you want to make, there should be no shame in that being a part of your purpose. That doesn't mean that you are not valuable to the world. That does not mean that you are a failure as a woman. I believe that this narrative is such a lie and so disruptive. And that is a beautiful thing. If that your purpose is to stay home with your kids. One of my very best friends, she is very educated, very skilled. She's very in demand. She's business, and she works full-time for another organization. And she has made the decision that really what her purpose is for this stage of life is to stay home with her kids. And I think that is a beautiful, beautiful purpose for this season of her life. And she very much so feels at peace with that. So I want to encourage a mom who's out there listening that if that's the case for you and you've been feeling that tug, but you feel shame around it, perhaps, that it doesn't feel like it's the most glamorous purpose, that is the hardest job of all. That is the hardest job of all. So I just want to applaud you moms out there. It may also look like for you that you're realizing to step into your purpose, to realize your passion, skills, and values, you might need to make a massive career pivot. And that might be really scary. If you want to live your life on purpose, we're going to talk a little bit about what may be holding you back, but that is how it might play out, right? You might have to make a massive career pivot to live into your purpose. It might look like starting your own business. That is what I did. I've had a lot of clients, ironically, who have worked with me, and it's not my intention for this to happen, but quite a few of them have started their own either side hustles or full-time businesses. And that has been so fun to watch them step into that purpose when they realize that, wow, I can't really do what I want to do in the world, and to step into my own skills and really exert my own values unless I start my own thing. And I'm going to be applauding you all the way to the bank, my friends. I love when women start businesses. I love when they go after their dreams, and I love when they take a chance on themselves. And so I would encourage you, if you're listening to this and you've been like, Jena, I know that I want to step into my purpose. I know that I've been wanting to start this business, but I haven't had the guts to. We're going to talk through what might be holding you back. It may look like nothing to do with your career, folks. It may literally look like volunteering for an organization. I know we've had a very active year, right? There's been a lot of things that have come to the surface. And I believe that putting your hands and feet into your local communities is so important to actually make change happen. And so volunteering for an organization may be a way for you to live on purpose. One of the organizations we're super passionate about here, just me personally in my life and just in my business in general, is the foster care system. We're involved with an organization called Tennessee Kids Belong, which is a part of a bigger organization called America's Kids Belongs, but it's intended to help bring awareness and visibility to the foster care, children in the foster care and in the foster care system, and to help them throughout that process, whether they're aging out and they don't have a family, which is a whole devastating thing that I can't go into because I'll probably start crying. But you've got to figure out the thing for you. You got to figure out what is maybe living on purpose for you might be volunteering for an organization and providing something to your local community about something you feel really passionately about. Maybe it looks like leaving stability for risk. Maybe living on purpose is being a little bit riskier in your life and in your career and taking more chances. Because maybe you've actually played it small. And you really actually need to play it a little bigger. And what that requires of you is to leave stability and go into a little bit of risk. I know for myself, when I started my business, I moved across the country at the same time. And that was like a very, very big deal, a very, very big deal. And so I get that feeling 120%. If you're feeling the stress of that, I totally get it. It might look like for you writing a book. Maybe you've been wanting to write a book and you just haven't done it yet. But in order for you to truly step into your purpose for this season of life, it may be looking like writing down the thoughts that you have about a specific subject. It could be informational. It could be a novel. It could be anything. But maybe I feel somebody who's listening to this maybe wants to write a book. Maybe that's what you need to do to step into your purpose. And just in general, it might look for you just sharing a message with a friend, with a colleague on social media. It just might be that your purpose is sharing a very specific message. And so hopefully this helps you define a little bit about what does it look like to step into your purpose, or what does purpose mean? Does it always mean career? Hopefully you've realized it doesn't have to just mean your career, but that it may be a part of your career. And if it is a part of your career, just making sure that you understand what that entails. It's your passion, it's your skills, it's your values, it's what the world needs, and what can you be paid for. So that's all fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, if we are being held back from living on our purpose, right, we have to really identify what that is, like what's holding us back. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is the thing that I've seen hold me back from living on purpose, and what may be holding you back from living on purpose. And it's the fear of rejection. It's the fear of wanting everyone to like you. So if you're listening to this podcast, you most likely, not that I want to put a label on you. I got a lot of Enneagram 3s that are on this, listen to this podcast. One, probably because I'm an Enneagram 3, and overachievers often listen to this. Now, if you are not an Enneagram 3, we welcome you. I'm so grateful you're here. But I often find that my Enneagram 3s really, really love personal development and professional development and achieving. So if you have a fear of rejection, you may be being held back from your purpose because you're scared that it's not going to work. You're scared people are going to make fun of you. You are fearful that people are not going to like you. They're going to misunderstand you or think you're silly or dumb or an imposter. All of these things, this fear of rejection is going to hold you back from actually stepping into your purpose. It might be good now, but it could be great if you overcame your fear of rejection. And I know for myself, this was something early on in my business that I was really fearful of. And it kept me from posting on social media to get the word out there about what I was doing. I was so worried that my old coworkers were going to judge me. And you know what? They probably did. The reality is, even getting over the fear of rejection doesn't mean you're not going to get rejected. And I know for myself, I very much was so in different stages of my life, but I was more scared of not fulfilling my potential than I was at a certain point of getting rejected from people. And the thing is it evolves over time. So there's different stages of my life and my career where I fear people making assumptions about me. And I fear that they're going to think who I am is not really who I am and that my motivations are not pure. And at the end of the day, though, if you let rejection take hold of your life, it's going to win. You're going to let those people or that subject or that fear, you're going to let that win, whether it's real or imaginary. So I really want you to think about, what are you fearful of? If we're talking about purpose and you started thinking about some things about, this is how it would look like for me to live on purpose, and then you see yourself this fear of rejection starting to bubble up, I would just pay attention to it. I would just notice it, acknowledge it, expect it to happen, but also understand and ask yourself, how can you push through it? Let me tell you a story of when I was early on in posting on LinkedIn. And we've grown a lot in the past year and a half on LinkedIn, but especially in the last year. But I would say one of my first posts that I wrote was about business cards that went viral. It was about business cards. It had like 120,000 views in like 48 hours. And I said that business cards were dead. It was kind of a tongue-in-cheek little post, but y'all, the amount of people that wrote, "You're dumb. I can't believe you would say that." You would have thought that I told them to kill somebody. People were all up in arms about business cards. So the reality is, if something so simple as that seems so silly and so ridiculous, and when I was truly trying to make a tongue-in-cheek joke, and you're going to have haters for something like that, expect yourself to be rejected. If you're going to put yourself out there and live in your purpose, there's going to be resistance. That is normal. But I want you and I need you to get over that fear of being rejected. Because on the other side, you may have actually impacted somebody and you may have impacted to move your mission forward as well. So here are some practical ways to actually deal with rejection. Number one, I want you to acknowledge it, right? Like, wow, that feels really crappy that I'm being rejected right now by X amount of people, or that job, or that opportunity, or, I thought this was exactly where I was supposed to go and I'm feeling rejected right now. I'm worried that no one's going to respond, right? Then I want you to practice. I want you to practice telling yourself what it actually looks like to be rejected. So I want you to put yourself into situations where you're going to be rejected. I can't remember the article that I was reading, but I think I talked about it a couple weeks ago, where there was a gentleman who purposely tried to get rejected every day for like forever. And I don't necessarily do that for myself. And I need to get into the practice of putting myself into situations where I'm going to either fail or get rejected, because that helps build resilience. And so I want you to practice getting rejected. And if you have any ideas of how you've actually practically done this on your day-to-day, I want you to send me a message over on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear kind of what you're doing to get ahead of rejection and to not let it control you. So step one is acknowledging that it's there. Step two is practicing it so that you build up resilience to it. And number three is be kind to yourself. Rejection still stings, no matter how much you had perhaps built up a resiliency to it. There are certain things that may trigger you deeper than others. I've had that happen to me. And so your job is to be kind to yourself, to acknowledge and to humbly admit where maybe you have gone wrong or that you not rightfully should have been rejected, but just to be kind to yourself and don't sink into the self-doubt because it's not helpful. And number four is to look inward, right? So sometimes when we're rejected, maybe it was like we reached out to somebody to be on their podcast. I'm just using an example. And because we want to share this message and we feel like we're living in our purpose and they reject us, we can look at that and say, all right, was there something that I said that was, not kind that made them not want to bring me on their podcast? Or was it just like the nature of the beast? Like, this is just what it is, right? It's important for us to just not just look at rejection and be like, I don't care if I'm being rejected. Who cares about that? I do think that a very human and humble element is to actually look inward and say, okay, why did that rejection happen? And is it something that I can do to help? What did I learn from this? And how can I improve in the future? So I believe that if you acknowledge, you practice being rejected, you're kind to yourself in the process, and you look inward, that's a humble and pride-free way to step into your purpose, to be able to handle and become resilient with rejection and to get over that fear so that you can actually blast through. Because if you're not fearful of getting rejected, you're going to do a lot more awesome things. I'm even seeing that for myself in this next stage of my business, that if I let go of the fear of rejection or the fear of failure, I can actually untangle myself from being held back. Like, I'm holding myself back. No one else is. I'm the one that's holding myself back. So I think we need to look inward and ask ourselves, where are we being held back? Well, y'all, I think this is a really intense topic to chew on. Purpose, right? It's a very big thing, but hopefully we've kind of simplified it for you. We've provided some definitions, some structure to help you understand how do you determine what your own purpose is. what might be holding you back and giving you some practical steps to break free from the thing that's holding you back, which is most likely yourself. And so I would love to hear from you. Where is rejection holding you back? I would love to know what your key takeaway was from this episode. If you want to send me a LinkedIn message, I would love to meet you, to hear how this is motivating you or exciting you or getting you to think a little bit. But I'm just proud of you for showing up today, for listening, and I will see you next week. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for listening to Your Career Story podcast. I would love to get to meet you. And there are a couple of ways that we can connect in between episodes. First and foremost, you know I love my LinkedIn. Second is via Instagram. And third is over on my website. I actually have a special spot just for you full of fun, free resources. So all you have to do is go to www.jenaviviano.com/resources. Super simple, for a bunch of freebies that will help you boost your career. Hope to see you next week.